festival at Cheltenham is one of the world's great sporting occasions, and a little rain couldn't dampen our spirits. I had ridden so often round this course that I felt that I knew each blade of grass as an old friend. In my dreams I still rode here, surging down the hill towards the home straight, kicking hard into the downhill fence when others would take a hold to steady themselves at this notorious obstacle. Here many a partnership would come crashing to the turf, if not foot perfect. But winning was the important thing, and while taking a hold might have been safer, kicking your horse hard could gain you lengths over the fence. Lengths the opposition may not be able to regain up the hill to the finish line. It had been a racing fall that had ended my riding career. It should have been easy. My young mount, stumbling while landing over the second fence in a novice chase, had failed to untangle its legs from underneath his neck and went down slowly to our right. I could have almost stepped off, but chose to move with the falling animal and roll away from his flailing hooves. It was just unfortunate that a following horse, having nowhere else to go, had landed with all its weight on the outstretched palm of my left hand. But it was more criminal than unfortunate that the horse had been wearing an old racing shoe, sharpened by use into a jagged knife edge, which had sliced through muscle, sinew, bone, and tendon, leaving my hand useless and my life in ruins. But I shouldn't complain. I'd been champion jockey for 4 consecutive years, having won more jump races than anyone else, and would probably by now have had to retire anyway. At 38, I was well past the age at which even I thought it would be considered sensible to inflict the continuous battering on a human body. Sid, Charles said, snapping me back to reality, remember, I'm the guest of Lord Enstone today, and he asked me whether you'd be coming up to his box for a drink later. Maybe, I said, still half thinking about what might have been. He seemed quite insistent that you should. Charles was pressing the point, and I knew him well enough to know that this was his way of saying that it was important to him. I'll be there. If it were important to Charles, I would indeed be there. I owed him a lot, and paybacks such as this were cheap. At least, that is what I thought at the time. We joined the throng pouring into the racetrack from the parking lots. "Hello, Mr. Halley," said the gateman. "What do you fancy for the big race?" "Hello, Tom," I replied, reading the name on his badge. "Oven cleaner must have a good chance, especially if we get much more of this rain, but don't quote me." He waved me through with a laugh, and without properly checking my badge. Ex-jockeys were a thorn for most racetracks. Did they get free entry or not? And for how long after they'd retired? Did it depend on how good they'd been? Why wouldn't they go away and stop being an embarrassment, always carrying on about how much better it had been when they were riding, and that the jumps were getting too easy and hardly worthy of the name? If Tom had studied my badge more closely, he would have seen that, like me, it was getting a bit old and worn. I had simply not returned my jockey's metal badge when forced to retire, and I'd been using it ever since. No one seemed to mind. Charles disappeared with a wave to make his way to the private luncheon boxes high in the grandstand, while I walked unchallenged to the terrace in front of the weighing room next to the parade ring. "Sid Halley." I turned with a smile. "How's the sleuthing business?" Bill Burton, ex-jockey, and now a mid-rank racehorse trainer whose waistline was getting bigger rather more quickly than his bank balance. "Fine, Bill." We shook hands warmly. "Keeping me in mischief. Good, as long as you keep your nose out of my business." He said it with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. We had ridden against each other regularly over many seasons, and both of us knew that he had never been totally adverse to a little extra cash for ensuring that his horse didn't get to the finish line first. He would adamantly argue that he would only stop those who had no chance anyway. What crime was there in that? I could read in his face, I thought, that he had probably not changed his ways in moving from the saddle to the saddling box. Shame, I thought. Bill was not a real villain, but rumours were beginning to circulate that he was not fully honest either. As always, it was much easier to get such a reputation than to lose it. Bill couldn't see that he was never going to be the leading trainer, as he'd hoped, not because he didn't have the ability, but because he would not be sent the best horses by the most knowledgeable of owners. "Do you have any runners today?" I asked. "Candlestick in the first and Leaded Light in the fifth, but I wouldn't risk his shirt on either of them." I wasn't sure whether he was warning me that they might not be trying their best. My doubts saddened me. I liked Bill a lot. We'd been good friends and racing adversaries for many years. He seemed to sense that I was looking deeper into his eyes than was prudent, and briskly turned his head away. "Sorry, Sid," he said in my ear as he pushed past into the weighing room. "Got to go and find my jockey." I watched him disappear through the door, and then looked up in the paper who his jockey was. Huw Walker, one of the sport's most popular journeymen. He'd never yet made it to number 1, but had been consistently in the top 10 over the past 8 or 9 years, with numerous rides and plenty of winners. Son of a Welsh farmer, with, it was said, a fondness for fast women and fast cars, in that order. I hadn't heard that he was ever suspected of pulling. Horses, that is. In one of those strange, almost supernatural moments, I looked up to find Huw Walker coming towards me. "Hello, Huw," I said. "Hi, Sid. Did you get my message?" He looked far from his usual cheery self. "No," I replied. "Where did you leave it?" "On your answering machine, last night." "Which number?" "London number." He was clearly anxious. "Sorry, I'm staying with my father-in-law for the festival." "It doesn't matter. I can't talk here. I'll call you again later." "Use my cell phone," I said, and gave him the number. He then rushed off, disappearing into the weighing room. Even though it was still well over an hour to the first race, it was beginning to be rather crowded on the weighing room terrace, not least because everyone was getting close to the building to protect themselves from the rain that had begun to fall more intensely. There was the usual mix of officialdom and press, bloodstock agents and the media, trainers and their jockeys, both present and past. Here the gossip of the week was swapped and dirty jokes were traded like currency. Juicy rumours spread like Asian flu, who was sleeping with whom, and who had been caught doing so by a spouse. Divorce was rampant in the racing business. I wandered amongst the throng with my ears open, catching up on events in racing land. "Such a shame about that Sandcastle colt," said someone in a group over my left shoulder. "Didn't you hear? Bought for $500,000 at Newmarket sales last October as a yearling, put his foot in a rabbit hole yesterday morning, and broke his hock so badly he had to be put down." I moved on. "Useless jockey flogged my horse half to death just to get a 3rd place." A large duffel-coated trainer, Andrew Woodward, was in full flow in front of a small group. "Damn it, he'd got himself banned for 4 days. I'll give him excessive use of the whip on his bloody arse if he does that again." His fan club chuckled appreciatively, but I believed him. Having once found his teenage daughter canoodling with an apprentice jockey in the feed store, he had held the hapless young man down over a hay bale and thrashed his bare buttocks raw with a riding whip. Some accounts say his daughter got the same treatment. It had cost Woodward a conviction for assault, but it had won him respect. He was a very good trainer, but he had a well-deserved reputation as a hater of all jockeys. Some said that it was simple jealousy. He'd always been too heavy to be a jockey himself. I had ridden for him a few times, and more than once had received the lash of his tongue when results did not pan out as expected. He was not on my Christmas card list. I drifted over nearer to the steps down to the parade ring, where I had spotted someone that I did want to talk to. "Sid, may old mucker." Paddy O'Fitch was a fellow ex-jockey, shorter than I by an inch or two, but a walking encyclopedia on racing, especially steeplechasing. He spoke with a coarse Belfast accent, and revelled in all things Irish. But the truth was that he'd been born in Liverpool.